Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Rising. I'm Krystal Ball.
And I'm Saagar and Enjeti.
A lot of things went down yesterday. Chuck and Nancy and some other folks in the White House to talk about infrastructure. It didn't go so well.
Yeah, the Shakespearean drama that is our politics continues.
All that and so much more today on Rising.
So, Krystal, lots of drama here in Washington.
Indeed.
What is going on?
So today we start with a scary story. It's about the curse of Infrastructure Week. You like our little music there. All right, so a little bit of backstory here on Infrastructure Week for those who haven't been keeping track, and this is per the reporting of the Washington Post. Basically, every time the administration has said they're going to do Infrastructure Week, something crazy happens. Just a few highlights here. The first Infrastructure Week was blown up when the Washington Post reported that Trump shared highly classified intelligence with Russians in the Oval Office. The second Infrastructure Week was blown up when former FBI Director James Comey accused Trump of lying in congressional testimony, and then Trump accused him of lying back on the next day. The third Infrastructure Week was blown up when at a press conference that was supposed to be about infrastructure, the president instead took the opportunity to talk about how both sides were responsible for violent protests in Charlottesville. Those are just the first three. We are now on the seventh Infrastructure Week, and what happened yesterday is Chuck and Nancy and a number of other Democrats went to the White House ostensibly to talk about a forthcoming infrastructure package. The president threw a hissy fit, stormed out because Nancy Pelosi earlier in the day had accused him of a cover-up, of executing a cover-up, which, fact check, he is actually doing. He then went on to say that he will not do anything with the Democrats, including infrastructure, so long as they are investigating him. So essentially, holding your roads and bridges hostage in order to keep his own personal documents out of the public record. Let's take a little bit of a listen to Trump talking about what happened and then Pelosi talking about what happened.
And I told Senator Schumer, Speaker Pelosi, I want to do infrastructure. I want to do it more than you want to do it. I'd be really good at that. That's what I do. But you know what? You can't do it under these circumstances. So get these phony investigations over with.
We had hoped that we could give this president an opportunity to have a signature infrastructure initiative. He just took a pass, and it just makes me wonder why he did that. In any event, I pray for the President of the United States, and I pray for the United States of America.
In other words, bless his heart. I mean, I have to say, I've been a Pelosi critic at times, but she clearly gets under the president's skin by my count. This is Pelosi 3, Trump 0 in the new Pelosi as Speaker of the House era. There was the government shutdown meeting where she got Trump to accept full blame and responsibility for the then impending government shutdown. There was a State of the Union moment where you will all recall the image of her incredibly executed clap. I believe we have that picture. There we go. Stole the show, State of the Union. No one remembers anything other than that clap from the State of the Union. And now you have this moment where I think the politics of this are terrible for Trump. Look, an infrastructure package was probably never going to happen anyway. It was probably a fantasy. But in the previous regime, in the previous world, before yesterday, Trump could have blamed Democrats. They're not playing ball. They don't want to work with me. They don't want to give me a win. And that was, a reasonable case that he could make. Now he accepts complete responsibility for nothing happening on infrastructure. So again, my count is Pelosi 3, Trump 0. And this may be a bit of an overstatement, Saagar, but I actually feel like the president's failure on infrastructure is one of the central failures of his presidency, because what I thought he would do, really, is first thing once he was sworn in, a big, huge, bridges and roads visible across the country in every district. Democrats would have had to work with him on it. He was newly elected. They want those things in their districts too. It would have been tremendously popular. Just open up the purse and spend tons of money all over the country. Instead, he went with the incredibly controversial Muslim ban, and that set the tone for his administration instead of doing something like infrastructure. And now what should have been the easiest thing for him to get done in his entire presidency isn't going to happen.
Well, that's what Steve Bannon wanted to do, as you'll remember. He wanted to put the Democrats in a box where they had to back him on infrastructure. And you're right. I think it is one of the central failings of the Trump presidency is he got in and he made the mistake of trusting the people that he ran against. He trusted Paul Ryan and he trusted Mitch McConnell to put his agenda before theirs. Their agenda has been the same since the day they got to Congress, which is cut spending and to cut taxes.
Yeah.
They don't want to repeal and replace health care, except to probably repeal health care. The replace part, not yet so sure about. And they don't particularly want to spend $2 trillion on infrastructure. So it is the ideological tension, and the president didn't really wise up to that he was getting played until the midterm elections.
Yeah. What are you looking at?
Well, what's on my radar is the I word. That's what we're all talking about here in Washington. The I word is, of course, impeachment. Now, the President of the United States and the Speaker of the House faced off yesterday in a very high tense battle, as we've been talking about. Let's take a listen to their sparring words.
We believe that no one is above the law, including the President of the United States, and we believe that the President of the United States is engaged in a cover-up.
Instead of walking in happily into a meeting, I walk in to look at people that had just said that I was doing a cover-up. I don't do cover-ups.
What you just witnessed there in the Rose Garden is basically Trump hitting the red button. And it's not the red button that I've seen on his desk where he calls for Diet Coke. And the reason that this is such an extraordinary event is it effectively ends by any hope of bipartisan cooperation for this Congress. We now have only one option. We know what the Democrats are going to do. They're going to impeach President Donald Trump. And this is because there are two roads, but they lead down the same path. Over and over again, we've heard that these investigations are mere queries into the Trump organization, into his tax returns, into the administration, into Jared Kushner's security clearance, into Ivanka's security clearance. We all know where that is going. If you give them the documents, they're going to impeach you. If they don't give them the documents, they're also going to impeach you. It is remarkable that the narrative and conventional wisdom here in Washington is that Nancy Pelosi is some strategic genius who has maneuvered President Trump into walling off all hopes of bipartisan cooperation. She has actually made herself much worse off. And in fact, we're all worse off because now what she has made is a zero-sum game for her caucus. That meeting that she came out of in which she accused the president of a cover-up is one in which she convinced the Democrats, the growing number of the Democratic caucus who want to impeach President Trump, that they need to work on policy and focus on their investigations. So, Krystal, to me, this is a massive strategic error. She goaded Trump on the cover-up comment before walking into this meeting, and has effectively walled it off. Can you imagine a greater gift to the Democratic caucus who wants to impeach?
See, I see it totally differently because you have now, she looks so strong, he's melting down without them even having to go forward with impeachment.
I don't look at it as a meltdown.
And you have to look too at the fact that we've had two major court wins for the Democrats on the investigation stuff, and you have New York State passing
on the district level.
legislation.
Are these things actually going to hold up?
But
we have no idea,
true.
Yeah.
But those judges decided like lickety split.
Yeah, they were both Obama-appointed judges. Yes, Obama-appointed judges tend to do that.
The government's arguments here. So I actually think today versus earlier in the week, there's less of a chance that Democrats push forward with impeachment because Pelosi believes that Democrats lose the White House and the House in 2020 if they open impeachment inquiry. She believes that very firmly, and I think she is going to keep the caucus in line. And I support that view, not because of the politics, because I think the politics is actually more complicated than that. I think anyone who expresses confidence that, they know how impeachment is going to play out and it's going to be exactly like it was with Bill Clinton and Trump's going to be at 60. I think that's hubris to think that you know exactly how it's going to play. However, if your goal is just to damage Trump, impeachment is an okay, maybe so-so way of doing that. If your goal is actually to deal with Trumpism, with the rising populist forces that brought him to office, that's going to bring India's prime minister back to office, that's going to bring Australia, I mean, you look around the world, if your goal is to deal with that, impeachment is complete disaster, totally counterproductive to that goal. The only way to deal with that is to offer an alternative and actually execute on that vision. I mean, you have to have a left-wing populism to match the moment. That's the only way to really deal with the forces that brought Trump to power, even if in magical land you got the Senate to convict this president and get him out of office, you are left potentially with an even bigger problem than you have today.
And I think that is exactly where it's headed. I think the Speaker has fooled herself if she thinks that they're going to get their hands on some Deutsche Bank records and that people aren't immediately going to be screaming for impeachment. And that goes to my earlier point. Both these roads lead down the same path. They want to impeach. The investigation is a sham. It truly is. And if they legitimately wanted to have an inquiry into so many of the things that the Trump administration has done, I think that would be great. But that's not what they want. This is a forefront to an impeachment. The new rhetoric in this town is impeachment inquiry. I expect that to just ratchet up. And I think the Speaker dramatically hurt her chances of being able to reduce the talk of impeachment by turning it into a zero-sum game. She dared the president to walk out.
It was already a zero-sum game. This stuff was
it's
not going to happen
it's possible.
anyway.
It's
now
possible.
Trump's got the blame for it.
Not necessarily, right? Because now the right is behind Trump, and they look at it and say the Democrats walked in. The Democratic Speaker of the House says that it's a cover-up before trying to engage in bipartisan activity.
The right was already
It's just not going to
behind
work.
Trump.
I mean, we could be cynical about it. You might be right. Maybe it was always going to go this way.
It was,
but it didn't necessarily have to. So here we are. Great times.
Next up on Rising, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Dr. Ben Carson sits down for an extensive conversation with the Hill's editor-in-chief, Bob Cusack, which includes an explanation for Carson mixing up a housing term with a delicious cookie.
And a startling new CDC study breaks down the common mortality causes and the significant racial disparity in pregnancy deaths. Dr. Wanda Barfield will explain more next on Rising.